Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, who's probably way more composed than I am right now. Big round of applause for Sejohn Sarwick. Sejohn.
Hey everybody! What's up, Dev? What's going on? Why are we losing our shit already?
I don't know. Because I've done a lot this morning. Usually I'm like, I was up at 7 o'clock. I was up at 5 today because I had to take a friend to the train station. And I mean the actual train station, not the train station from Yellowstone. You know what that means, right? Have you watched Yellowstone? This is a question I can't believe we've never talked about.
I have not watched Yellowstone, and I'm going to guess it means take them out to pasture.
Well, no, that would be taking them out to pasture. In a ranch, that has a real meaning. To the train station means, in the show Yellowstone, spoilers for anyone who is in that cross-section of the Venn diagram, who listens to the Say Report and watches Yellowstone. So I guess Hi Claude, right? He had to watch it because his father-in-law was like, you need to watch it. And they didn't seem as pleased with the show.
I feel like that's the only reason anybody watches Yellowstone is because some older relative is like, this is what we watch now. So, okay.
That older relative is also Harrison Ford. This is what we watch now. But yeah, so the train station, spoilers again, is a dead man's area that is not Montana and is not Wyoming. You know how like when you cross into states, you're like, oh, there's that little area where like welcome to is before you, and you don't know if that means like that little stretch of highway between the two welcome to signs, is that anything? Turns out, in the world of Yellowstone, it's nothing. It's a nowhere land. So that's where they dump all the bodies.
It's an endless void. And that's where they load in the guns from the Matrix.
Yeah, that's where they dump the bodies, though, because technically it's in no one's jurisdiction. So if a body is found, oh, we just found a body. That's it. Doesn't matter.
So Yellowstone. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wait, Yellowstone. One of them is in the past, right? Isn't there?
Okay.
Isn't there like?
So there's Yellowstone, which is the show that blew up the Paramount network. Even though like the licensing to it belongs to Universal, that's a whole other thing. But then Paramount wanted to get their beak wet. Now they already have the golden goose of Taylor Sheridan, and they're milking that golden goose to death. But in the Yellowstone world, they did 1883, which was how the Dutton family got from Tennessee to Montana and got the land where they built the ranch. And that was a limited series, one and done. And the girl always talks like this in a narration point. It was at that time we learned that though we were hunting the food, we were also being hunted. That's how it is on the plains. Oh, God. Man does not reign king in the wilderness.
This is somebody's ASMR. I just want to
oh yeah. That. Congratulations for that cross section of the Venn diagram. No. And then they did 1923, which I just finished. And that is an 8-episode first season that has been confirmed for a second season, but I don't know when it's happening. And that one features Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. And Timothy Dalton. Like, I shouldn't, like, sleep on the Timothy Dalton of it all. That's a really enjoyable show. But here's the central focus of every episode of Yellowstone. I'm going to give you the Devon Decker 13-second synopsis.
Wait. What is the point of 1923, though? Like, what it, like, you
well,
said
I'll get to 19, but first I have to give you the 13-second synopsis of every episode of Yellowstone. The 13-second synopsis of every episode of Yellowstone is, I want that ranch. And then Kevin Costner going, I'm going to fight for this ranch. And then his daughter Beth going, I'm going to fucking kill something. That's every episode of Yellowstone, basically. There's other things, but that's basically every episode. So 1883 was them getting to the ranch. 1923 is literally just another season of Yellowstone, but set in the year 1923. Because it's all about, I want his ranch. And
I think the wildest thing about Yellowstone is actually how pervasive it's become outside of the TV show. There's like an entire like clothing line that is based around like I say based around, but I mean it's just like
inspired by,
hoodies and yeah, it's not even inspired by though. It's like it's literally like hoodies, and it's just like I don't think anybody on Yellowstone is walking around in these Walmart hoodies. Maybe I don't know. I don't watch the show. I guess
they wear a lot of sheepskin jackets and barn jackets and cowboy hats.
Yeah,
leather.
but and then there's like Yellowstone, like I think what was it, like apples or some shit I saw in the produce section the other day that had the Yellowstone, or potatoes or something. It was wild. Just like seeing the logo for that show and having no like real connection to it, and you know how like desperate like culture is nowadays, right? Like there isn't, even though it is a huge thing, right? Like I get that it's a huge thing. This is not me saying that it's not, but it's not like back in the days when everybody was watching X-Files. So like you knew, if you weren't watching it, you at least knew a bunch of people that were, right? I don't know anybody that's actually watching Yellowstone besides like you, right? Yeah, and so, like it's really weird to me to see it everywhere, know it's this kind of big pervasive thing, and still not really know anybody that's actually clued into it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong on that. The only reason I watched it is because, first of all, we are a Peacock household. We do still subscribe to Peacock, though it is specifically from my father's money, because he is the one who watches the most NBC programming. He fucking loves The Voice, and he loves the Chicagos. It's insane how much he loves NBC, and he's willing to pay $12.83 a month after taxes to make sure that he can watch them without commercials. Is pretty great. But that means I get access to it. So that's why I can do like crazy extended family stuff, which, oh my God, the St. Patrick's Day episode of Extended Family, off the fucking rails. Fantastic television though. But then as part of that was Yellowstone. And that talk of like everybody's watching it, everybody's talking about it, it's just not our generation that's involved in it. I know there are some people in our generation who are, like not just me, like some people I see online. I would say that their politics probably lean a little redder than the politics at the Say Report, just to be completely honest about the show. But my parents kept getting inundated with, "Are you watching Yellowstone? It's the best thing on TV." And when we got Peacock and we were scrolling through that first day, there was Yellowstone. So we watched the first episode, which is a movie. It is a double-length episode, plays like a movie, and it is a hard fucking watch. The pilot of Yellowstone, the 2-hour, like full 2 hours, that's not even like 88 minutes so we can shove commercials in there. Paramount, because it used to be, was it Spike? Was Spike the TV network for men? Spike TV?
Yes, Spike TV was
so
the
Spike TV has grown up to become the Paramount network, and they do not give a fuck about run times with their shows. Basically what like Netflix does with their original programming, or HBO. But the difference is that Paramount, they'll just start the next show at, you know, if it started at 12 and it's supposed to end at 1, but it ends at 1:23, the next show will just start at 1:24. And eventually they are able to self-correct to be on the hour timeline again. It's pretty intense. But so it's a full 2 hours, that pilot episode, and it's rough. It is just like rough television. And we walked away like, I don't see what people understand about it, what they enjoy about it, da-da-da-da-da. But then it started getting talked about on all the morning infotainment shows that the fourth season was coming back. So my parents were like, well, maybe we should give it another try. So we watched that episode again. Still a very hard watch. Still a watch that makes you want to like walk away and never sully your eyes with this show ever again. But then we're like, well, we're going to struggle through. We're going to watch the next one. And then it starts to get good. Because then it's like, oh, well, we actually have to build character out and give people real motivations, not just whatever. And I talk about Taylor Sheridan being this golden goose that they're just milking to death, mixing metaphors. I get that. But he also, on Paramount Plus, does the show Special Ops Lioness, which is one of the best television shows I've watched in the last year. He does the Jeremy Renner show where he runs the prison like triumvirate, where there are like three
Oh
states
yeah,
touch.
the Three Castles or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know the name of it.
Three Castles outside of Montana or some shit.
No,
Yeah,
that's about billboards. I'll look up Taylor Sheridan while we're talking, and I can tell you all the things that he works. And he also wrote Hell or High Water, so that's why he's got like the big name, because that movie did crazy. He also wrote Sicario, so Mayor of Kingstown is the one about all the prisons that intersect, and then he also does Tulsa King, which is set in Tulsa and stars Sylvester Stallone. So he's kind of just like, we're going to keep having him write stuff. He wrote Sicario. That was his first writing credit in 2015. And he has been working steadily since. He did Hell or High Water, Wind River, Sicario, Day of the Soldado. The Last Cowboy was a TV series he did. I've never seen that, but it only was a one and done. So like, that's where he comes into the picture. And now for Paramount, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he's working on 6 shows. And 3 of them are Yellowstone. So there you go. There's Taylor Sheridan. That's the whole thing. I don't even know how I get on this.
I don't know. We started talking about Yellowstone.
Oh, I did Harrison Ford. Yeah, but I don't know. So Yellowstone, and the final season's happening on the regular show, and then there's supposed to be a spinoff about a Texas ranch that was in it, and 1923 is going to continue, which is great because it's Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. But the parts I care about that show that I like are not the parts of, they want to take our ranch. This ranch is our legacy. It's like, yeah, we get it. Here's the other thing about Yellowstone. It's just The Godfather. Like 100% is The Godfather in cowboy boots. And that's something.
Yeah.
I don't
all right.
So that's the other thing, is I think that's why it's connecting with people of a certain age who are like, The Godfather was the first time their minds were blown. And then here's that same type of story again, but in a different outfit. I honestly, Sejohn, I cannot tell you how we got here. I finished 1923. I know that. I'm mostly about.
I don't know, but I'm gonna guess it was about some stuff going on with you said some stuff about your dad.
Oh, the train station.
Plus,
it was the train station. He pays for Peacock. That's all different. Oh man.
Oh, that's right. You were gonna take me to the train station.
I took someone to a train station. So I've been going since 5. And then once I got home, there's a reason this episode is called 3 Movies in a Fountain Soda. And that is because over the last 3 days, I have seen 3 movies. And I intend to talk about those 3 movies. But the other thing that's been floating around in my head like sugar plum fairies is, do you remember the double gulp at 7-Eleven?
Oh, God. The like tankard that you used to be able to get?
Yeah, the 64-ounce. Basically what Abby Shuto drank in the first couple of seasons of NCIS. She drank calf pow in these huge, they look like giant cylinders that you would store like half arms in, like forearms in. It's a forearm long, and then it's I don't know what the diameter is, probably about like 3 inches. That seems about right, and it's like forearm length, and you fill that with soda, and it's 64 ounces of soda. And for some reason, I could not tell you why this happened, that jumped into my head again, the double gulp, because I used to basically live on those when we were in college, mostly when I was delivering flowers, because the floral shop that I delivered flowers for was right next to a 7-Eleven. So the start of my shift before I headed out, I would get a double gulp of soda. That would be my drink for the whole day.
All right.
Yeah, so I was thinking about the double gulp, and I'm like, do they still do those? And I am sad to report that they do not. They do the super big gulp, which I believe is 44 ounces, but they no longer do the double gulp. But it was weird because I went to like a strange 7-Eleven that was near the train station, and the lids are still labeled as double gulp lids. Excuse me, that was awful.
That sounds like they have not gone through their supply.
Yeah, right. So that's
years.
I mean, they fit on the super big gulp thing. Apparently, I looked at the internet, because the internet is our best friend if we need information. The double gulp in 2012 got downsized from a 64 ounce to a 50 ounce, and now they're all gone.
Where does that line up in the timeline with Super Size Me and all that shit?
Well, it does line up with the city ban on soda.
There it is.
June 6, 2012. They eluded the ban, and they did it by reducing the size to 50 ounces. Actually, wait. They reduced the double gum size to 50 ounces. I have to pay you to read this, the New York Times? Dick off. Anywho. I know you're trying to be relevant in a new world order.
I will point out, as much as I don't agree that you have to pay to read the news, reading it into a recorded microphone and then putting it out as your own product is a bit of a line.
Right. I don't know. Apparently because customers found it ... But yeah, so they don't do it anymore. I checked it. But then I was also thinking that, like, I probably knew that because driving to the train station, those people were going to New Jersey, and they're like, oh, why we could have just gone to New Haven. And I would have done that. I would have driven somebody to New Haven to get on the PATH train to where they're going in New Jersey. But, like, and it's only $19 to do that, but where, like, the Amtrak to do it is, like, over $80.
Yeah.
Like, I will drive the hour and a half, the 3 hours round trip to take you to have a cheaper train. I get to spend more time with you. And then I remembered the last time that I did that. I also remembered the first time that I did that because I was talking with someone like, I kind of want to go to New York for this event, but I've never been to New York before. I'm nervous. And I was reminded of my first time going to New York when I was in college. And I mean, like, alone. I had been to New York before. But, like, it's just Devon getting on a train going to New York. And then I met up with people. But, like, I had to figure out the city on my own. And, like, New York is, like, made for Devon Decker. At least it was, God, however many years ago that was. 2008, maybe? Jesus. They're just, like, thinking it through. And then the last time that I rode on a train, with the PATH train in, I was seeing one of the movies made by those Greek filmmaking brothers that went to URI. They were judges at a bunch of stuff. Oh my God, I can think of their first names. I can't think of their last names right now. It was, I feel real bad about that. Giovanni's, is that it? Run it. I don't know. I'm sorry.
You are so far down the rabbit hole, brother. I want to come with you and I want to help you out, but you got to get
the Giovanni's brothers, Evangelos and George Giovanni's. They were filmmakers who had attended our university, and I worked with them on a film in 2009 because I was like only half enrolled in college at the time. And it's called Run It, and I had gone up to New York to see the premiere of Run It, and at the little small theater that it was playing at, Dee Schneider also had a movie, so I ended up like meeting. That's the night I met Dee Schneider. Is kind of what I think of it as. Like, sorry, Run It. Sorry, Giovanni's brothers. Thank you so much for all of the experiences you gave me. They're gonna come up later on when I talk about the movies. But that train ride, that last time riding the PATH train, was the day that I decided, because I was like listening to podcasts the whole ride, and I'm like, I could do this. I should be making my own podcasts. So that's when I got home that weekend and I bought the first Mac Mini that we recorded like the first 6 seasons of the show with. And yeah, there was this amazingly moment, because then every other time I would go up to New York, I would drive because parking was less than getting the train and parking. And I found this really great little garage that was only about 4 blocks away from the theater that I was going to go see shows at. It was Doug Loves Movies, right? We're talking about podcasts. I have no problem saying that. And on the way home, I passed by a 7-Eleven, and I would always get the largest size fountain drink, and I never got a double gulp. So, like, all of the answers to my questions were there in my podcasting history. I just refused to look at them. And then I just want to tell one more story, and then I promise I'll let you talk, because I've just been rambling these last 20 minutes. Inspired by a bit of a nip of a Mountain Dew super big gulp that I did not finish. It's still in the car for tomorrow. And a full 32-ounce Baja Blast, because I had Taco Bell breakfast this morning. But one time, I went up to go see a show. I parked in that same garage, and like, because I was going to that garage semi-regularly, let's say like every 3 months, I had begun to develop a rapport with the guys who ran the garage. And I went up with a couple of friends, and because I had other people in the car, rather than do my like usual thing where I would stop at a convenience store and that, I like thought ahead and bought a couple of bags of chips and a 12-pack of Coke. And when it came time to leave, and we're leaving, like the show ends and it's almost like midnight that you're leaving the city. So the guy goes, and I'm like, thank you so much. And I'm like, I want to give you a tip, can you break a 5 or anything like that? And he's like, actually, would it be all right if I had one of those cans of Coke that you have in the back seat of the car? And I go, you could take 2. And I gave him 2, and I ended up giving him the tip, right? Because whatever. Like, that was just so cute, like the way that he's like, I'm really thirsty and a drink would do me more right now than like the couple extra dollars you're going to slip me, because I can't leave to go get a drink, right? Mm-hmm. And those 2 people that I was riding with were so offended by that like he asked to take one of the sodas. And I'm like, you do realize that like I left a 12-pack of Coca-Cola in the back seat. If he had just taken one, I wouldn't have noticed. And I also wouldn't have cared, right? I understand that anything I leave in the car is left at its own risk. I get that. I know what parking in New York is. But they were so offended that he had taken the time to ask for one of the cans of soda. Like, I don't get that. I still don't understand that to this day. Why that was so offensive to them.
I mean, some people aren't chill. We live in a really we live in interesting times, brother, and I hate it.
I mean, and this was like 10 years ago too. Like, that's the other thing is that. But it was just so weird, the whole fact of, is it all right if I have one of those cans of soda? Like, what? Such a simple request. And I'm like, yeah, of course.
The downward slope of human decency has actually been beneath our feet for a while.
Yeah, no, apparently it was one of those moments that like really opened my eyes up to it. To the fact that like 10 years later, I'm talking about it on this podcast as I'm thinking about stopping at the 7-Eleven before driving 3 hours home after seeing a show and standing in line. Like, I would get there at like 10 a.m. to make sure it was a general admission. I wanted to get a front row seat, right? And what is it? I love sitting in the city. I would have conversations with anybody. Like, I don't know if the city's safe enough to do that in now. I would like to hope it's safer now than it was 10 years ago. But yeah, so that's just kind of where my head has been at. A lot of trains and podcasts and soda stories. And I still have 3 movies, one of which is set in New York, so this whole thing makes sense. One of which I should have seen 2 years ago, but we'll get there. And one of which I still don't know what to think about it, because I came home from dropping people off at the train station and immediately watched this movie. And it was insane, but in the best ways possible. It was excellent, and I recommend it to everybody. It also makes me really sad. But before we get to the movies that I want to talk about, before I'll share my secrets with you, Sejohn, that's an inside joke for those online who are like, what? How you been, buddy?
Man, I'm good. I'm in a little bit of recovery mode because I ended up at a concert last night until about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Awesome.
So I came home, crashed, and now I'm here in front of all you lovely folks. But no, I went to go check out Chelsea Wolfe came through and was at this place downtown called the Depot. And Chelsea Wolfe is a phenomenal, like, I guess the best way to describe it would be experimental metal like artist. But essentially a lot of electronic like amplification, like a lot of shoegazy style stuff going on with like her keyboardist also having like 2 different MacBooks set up along with an entire old board of some type next to him after that. Like it's and then so it's very, very heavy stuff, right? Like I said, like it is metal, but like it's also very like almost jam band, like atmospheric in a way, like to the point where like the whole show there was no front lighting. All of the lighting is all backlighting and side lighting and foot lighting, but like nothing coming from the front. So you never really see any of the artists like face on stage. There's her and then she's got her keyboardist, she's got a drummer, a bassist, and another guitarist up there with her, but you just don't see any of them the whole time. Instead, it's just kind of just like listening to these like dark metal soundscapes for an hour and a half, and like there's a lot of light work involved. There's a lot of like fog machines, some like projection work and things like that. So it was awesome. It was a wild experience, and but super sensory overload, purposefully so. Like I knew what I was getting into when I went to it. It's not like I was like suddenly feeling like I was gonna have a seizure or anything, but like it is still a huge load, like as far as the sensory stuff goes. And then like came home, crashed, and then woke up. So I'm still a little bit in recovery mode.
Well, Well,
But yeah, my
hopefully
week
those.
has not been nearly as drastic as yours. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, hopefully my sleep that I like sacrificed was able to get sent to you so that you could be better rested. I'm so
Yeah.
I'm happy.
No, man, I've just been, this week has been pretty slow. Like we've been, just doing a couple of it's spring cleaning time, things like
Yeah, that's what
that.
I'm doing
Kind of
after
getting
the
that
show
mode.
today. A lot of spring
Yeah.
cleaning today.
Yeah.
Cleaned my
And
laptop.
then yeah, and there's also just been a bunch of stuff that's come out that I'm interested in like checking out, TV shows, movies, video game, all this stuff. But like just in that space where I'm trying to just now decide like where the money's gonna go, right? This is the same space I feel like everybody's in nowadays, and it's
Oh,
why nothing seems to be like selling anymore. But I just I'm trying to part of me is falling into some old bad habits about like movie research that I feel like we have really kind of talked about getting away from on this show, right?
mhm.
Like getting so deep into stuff that like you're spoiling things, but not even spoiling things. Like it's like you're not even watching the movie at some point. At some point, you're just there because of all of the stuff going on behind the scenes, and and for the price of a ticket nowadays, that's not a great way to go about it, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it's just been kind of a week of just like trying to figure out over the next couple of months like where my money wants to go for this sort of stuff, and then like dealing with weird shit like AI creeping into more and more movies and people being like, well, we can't support this, and me trying to figure out what side of that conversation I'm on. And then like all of the stuff going on in gaming with like all sorts of various fun scandals, and not even necessarily scandals, but big stories. The guys behind Baldur's Gate 3 basically be saying but not saying Wizards of the Coast kind of cut us deep, so we're just not going to work on this franchise anymore. We have no interest in continuing, which is wild considering the massive success of Baldur's Gate 3. But they feel very, according to what they have said, they feel like they told their story and are ready to move away from that world. But that is such a bummer considering what they did. And everybody who's like on the like hate train for Wizards of the Coast is like, they must have done something, right? They must have just pissed them off so bad. And it's like, I don't know. We're never gonna know that story. I don't know. It's been a wild week for bad news, I guess.
Yeah. So when we talk about AI in films, we're talking about Late Night with the Devil. I imagine that's
Yeah,
sort of been the
that's
tipping
that's
point of
the
it.
that's the conversation right now, and it's such so for anybody that's not aware of what's going on, we should bring them up to speed.
Yeah.
There's a smaller upcoming horror film called Late Night with the Devil that has oh man, Polka Dot Man, what's his name there?
David
Cameron.
Delmash. It's hard to say his name. That's why I waited.
Yeah, but it's a big lead.
David
It's one of his.
Dastmalchian is his name. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a so there's a lot of horror fans out there that recognize him from various projects, and there's a lot, in smaller things. Like I said, he played Polka Dot Man in James Gunn's Suicide Squad, things like that.
He's a
And
member
I
of
really
the
like the guy.
ex-con team in the Ant-Man movies. I really like him in the Ant-Man movies.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot he plays the guy with the accent,
Yeah,
right?
he
Isn't that
plays
the bit?
the Eastern European gentleman.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he's a phenomenal actor. So like immediately drawn to this movie, and then like the styling of it, right, which is important. But like the whole idea is that it is this 1960s 1970s
1977. October
yeah,
31st,
late night.
1977. Found footage.
Right, it's a Halloween night in the late 70s, and he's a late night TV show to host, like, Letterman. And there's the dual narrative of the episode that they're filming, right? And then also behind the scenes you're learning that the show's not doing well. So what he's doing on the show that night for Halloween night is like kind of a last ditch effort to save the show style story. And in that he has a young girl on that is supposedly possessed, and then shit goes awry, and horror movie ensues, right? But it's such a unique atmosphere for what's going on, especially with the idea that there is a live audience there, plus there is the television audience that you're supposedly seeing, like, and that sort of stuff. That's a really cool kind of twist on things. The styling of it, so everything has that great like late 70s look to it, the clothing, the colors, the title cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this is where it gets sticky, is because apparently three, I think it's been confirmed, three title cards within that appear like for 30 seconds on screen each. They're just like title cards. For some of them are like jokes for other shows. One of them is like a title card, I think, for like a "We'll be right back" style thing.
Yep.
Apparently the artist working on the movie used AI for these few images, right? Like he used AI to generate these few images. And it's a really weird and interesting conversation going on right now, because it's really starting to show that people don't actually have a good idea of what AI is doing in these spaces. As much as they want to have an opinion about whether or not they think it's bad or it's good, a lot of people don't seem to understand what AI is actually being used for in these moments. Because I think generally people believe that somebody's just pulling up Chat GPT, um, and then at that point they're just typing in "show me this picture," like, and then it just pops up, and then they put that into the movie and they're done. Right? That's kind of the assumed process,
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily the case all the time. There are probably instances where that is happening. I'm not going to say that there is not like corners being cut majorly in certain places. But for instance, what seems to be going on here with this is that there's an artist that is involved in a lot of what you see on screen. This is not the only thing that they did. They were not the AI artists that created these 3 things that you see for less than a minute and a half on screen. That's just that they were doing much more on the movie. In this one moment, they decided to employ AI in order to create these things. And in that, they didn't just like ask for the picture and then use that. They then take the picture that they're given and then they go through and they do cleanup work. They do processing, they do filtering, they do all this other stuff over it to make it more in line with everything else that's going on in the movie, right? And so there is more process to it than I think people realize. And the other side of that is that's not much more process than what people have been doing for the last 20 years using computers, period. Right?
Right.
This feels
exactly.
like very much like a conversation about somebody with Photoshop 20 years ago talking about how that's not real photography anymore because it has been quote unquote photoshopped. And I mean, we've turned Photoshop into such a dirty word that it almost fucking drove Kate Middleton off a cliff this week, right? Like, but Photoshop is such a frowned upon like concept that it's like a dirty word. And I read a really interesting article this week that was defending the idea that like we need to stop saying photoshopped as if that's the bad thing and just say faked, because Photoshop is now employed in every instance of photography. It's just impossible to get away from. And Photoshop, funny enough, has quote unquote AI assisted tools in order to do things like clean up edges and help with focus and take care of color matching and things like that. People have been doing that for 20 years to film longer, right?
Yeah, to film
like
longer.
Color
That's what
correcting
editing is.
Like
I mean,
yeah, right, exactly. So like at what point are we going to be okay with this just being another tool in the toolbox? Because this is not going away. This is a thing that we have talked about a million times now, AI this year alone. AI is not going away, and AI has kind of been around longer than we all realized in this kind of instance. And what we're talking about isn't even really technically truly AI, which I think is the biggest crime of all, is that the amount of conversation going around talking about AI, and it's not even really AI, like it's just editing tools in certain places. It's just been wild listening to people give their hot take on this whole thing, especially when it comes to this movie, especially when it comes down to the fact that it's just less than a minute and 30 seconds of film in this movie. This artist did a ton of other work on this movie besides those moments, but this is now what everybody's going to focus on. It's just like, it's really showing people's ignorance in this conversation. Oh. And it's not even that I'm saying you don't have a right to be mad. You totally have a right to be mad at or not take in this kind of artwork if you don't want. But you need to make sure that you are well informed before you make these kinds of stated opinions out on the internet, right? Feel whatever you want in your head. I'm not going to tell you what to think in your own head. But if you're going to put that shit out on the internet and it's poorly researched or poorly informed, I'm going to call your ass out on that shit. And there's a lot of poorly informed conversation going on around this specific movie right now, Late Night with the Devil, the use of AI and how people feel about that in film going forward. Because like, I don't even know how to begin to be like, you know how many movies you've probably watched over the last 20 years that basically did this with like different steps, not even more or less steps, just different steps to get the same thing on screen. And like, why are you the kind of person that doesn't like to go to Marvel movies because you think CGI's gotten too out of hand? That's cool. Like, are you not a big like sci-fi person because things like the green screen effects that people are kind of anti-Dune about right now? That's not a huge movement, but there's definitely people out there that are just like, yeah.
Well, we want like, real sandworms, right? Why are you making a Dune movie and not giving us real sandworms?
The practical effect conversation is definitely one that's been going on since the early 90s, right? Like, so like, people are always going to have these kinds of opinions, and again, I'm not opposed to people having those opinions, but listening to people just spout nonsense about it is really rubbing my head wrong.
So
My brain hurts a
this
bit.
is not one of my 3 movies that were thrown into the fountain soda. I chose another film that released on March 22nd, 2024. Because that's the other thing, is Late Night with the Devil is available to go see now in theaters. If anything that we've said has prompted you to want to check it out, it's still out there. It's still available. But the thing about this story that has, where I kind of stopped, where I'm like, I don't really care about the hot takes on AI, and I have no problem with you bringing it up. I want to make sure that's clear, but I'm just like, maybe go do your research a little bit. I sent you 2 dates in our chat, and those 2 dates are the dates that the writer's strike started and the SAG-AFTRA strike started. For the writers, it was May 2nd, 2023, and for SAG-AFTRA, it was July 14th, 2023. Now, we now know, since we're a year out from those strikes almost, when they started, that the big focus on those was this fear of AI taking jobs, right? So I understand why people might have these hot takes about, oh my God, I can't believe a film released in 2024 is utilizing AI. But the film premiered March 10th, 2023 at South by Southwest. So this film was completed before the discussion of AI was the hot button topic in Hollywood, closing down production for, what was that? I think it was almost like 9 months of production. No, 6. It was 6 months of production that was shut down, basically, because of the people who were on strike. So it's not like it was done afterwards, right? And this is an example of, here's what AI looks like after the strike. What were we fighting for? This is 3 images generated by artificial intelligence that appeared in a film that was shot in 2022 and premiered in 2023.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really the place to have that discussion. When Secret Invasion, remember Secret Invasion, to talk about Marvel again?
I was gonna point to that. Yeah.
When Secret Invasion premieres and has a AI generated opening theme song, right? Like all the images are AI generated. That's a time to be like, what the fuck, right? Like, this doesn't seem like the time to do that. This does not seem like
I
the
will
thing
say
to get the
that
pitchforks out
this
about.
is, I will say the other side of that coin is, it is such little like time on screen and blah blah blah, that in the atmosphere of releasing this movie, why not go in and do something different? Like, but at the same time, I think that diminishes the kind of work that goes into creating that kind of stuff, even though it uses AI as a base. I mean, like, so the big thing for me is it starts to feel a little personal, because the kind of work that I do in doing some UI and UX stuff, right? There is definitely moments where I am employing AI like for like prompts, right? If I need to beef up my portfolio and I've got like some time as I'm between jobs, like one of the things that I will do is I will go to ChatGPT and I will give it a little bit more than this, but essentially I'll ask, give me a prompt for a design project. And it spits out a basic format of like, this is the product, this is the audience for it, this is the company history behind making it, give us what you got. And then like I use that to then generate an entire project, right? And like that is something that a ton of people are doing right now. That is something across the board. It is a highly like recommended, people that are like practicing writing are getting that. People that want to make animations on like YouTube. You can go to YouTube right now and type in AI like prompts, and you're going to get a ton of stuff of like everything from like, hey, we're gonna make a burger that was generated by AI today, to hey, we're gonna animate this comic that was generated by AI today. Like, there's AI is being used as a jumping off point in 1,000 places, a million places, and I don't see an issue with it in those cases, right? Especially not my own work. And it feels like that kind of where we are here, right? Is if AI is being used as like this jumping off point and other work is being done, we can't diminish that other work just because it started with like this AI generated thing. And it kind of again gets you into the Marvel stuff. And I come back to the same thing that I have said every time we have this conversation. As long as people are being open and honest about what is being used, it's not trying to sell it stuff as some great artist created this thing. As long as it is clear and the audience has the choice to engage with it or not, then at that point, I don't see an issue with the use of AI. The problems do become when people try and pass off stuff that is AI generated as their own work. That is where I think, like, as their own creation separate from, right? Because like telling a computer to write a novel and writing a novel yourself are two different tactics. I think still are both interestingly viable tactics, but they are different, and I want to know that going in as a consumer, and I have the right to know that going in as a consumer. I feel right, like
Yeah.
that's where I have always stood on this product on this problem. Like, and I still and I feel like with the information that we now have about this movie, going back to the whole handhold of this thing, right? Like, I feel like now that I know that, I have taken it in. I understand what I'm about to see as I go into it, and I am happy to consume it. I have no issue going to see this movie with that. The problem is now is just I just don't want to be part of this conversation right now. So it's like kind of turning me off from going to see it.
Yeah, and I get that. Here's what I'm going to say. This, for me, brings up real interesting questions about intelligence. Artificial or organic, I guess, is what you would consider what human intelligence is, but that's not a debate for us to have here or decide. But those are the terms I'm going to use. And I mean no disrespect to you, Sejohn, when I say this. I mean no disrespect to anybody who has done exactly what you outlined. But if you go to an artificial intelligence and ask it to give you a prompt for you to then do the work on, who's the artificial intelligence there? Like, it's a question of what the intelligence is doing, because there is definitely that group of people out there who are going to ChatGPT, giving ChatGPT the prompt that ChatGPT would generate for you, and then asking that collective intelligence, that collective artificially formed intelligence, to create a project. When you, as a human being, are being given a prompt to do by that artificial intelligence, like, it's just a real, like, freaking me out kind of thing about, like, the nature of intelligence and who is the machine and who is the man, and like, where does it stop and where does it go? Where did you come from, Cotton Eye Joe?
Yeah, I don't have those conundrums, I guess. And if that's where everybody else is at, that they're stuck in some like existential crisis because there's a machine out there that might be better than them at a thing, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of machines out there that are better at things that you do.
It's not, and that is definitely a thing of it. Like, and that's not the crisis that I'm having. It is the nature of you allowing ChatGPT to be the prompt starter. Like, that's like, oh, we're the same. Right? Like, this, I have never been afraid of artificial intelligence, much like Joe Biden before he saw Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning, when he wasn't afraid before then. Like, this conversation has really given me a look into why people might be afraid of artificial intelligence and what it means. And like,
so
for something kind of innocuous too.
Let me read you a ChatGPT conversation I had about exactly this.
I love this.
So all I said
You had this with ChatGPT?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I said, describe the logo for a YouTube channel about food aimed at teens. That's what I said. Mm-hmm. And so it gives me this write-up of the logo for a YouTube channel about food aimed at teens would likely be vibrant, playful, and appealing to a younger audience. Here's a description of such a logo. It features a stylized illustration of a smiling cartoon character, perhaps a fun-looking chef or a cute anthropomorphic food item, like a slice of pizza or cheerful cupcake. The character is depicted with exaggerated features, such as large expressive eyes and a big smile to convey a sense of friendliness and excitement. Behind the character, there could be various elements representing different types of food. The channel name is incorporated into the logo in a fun and youthful font, perhaps with playful lettering or a stylized typography. It could be placed above or below the character. To further enhance the teen focus theme, elements like speech bubbles, emojis, or popular symbols associated with youth culture could be added around the character, integrated into the design. Overall, the logo is designed to be eye-catching, fun, engaging, reflecting, and the channel's focus, content tailored specifically for teens. And so there is so that's what's given to me, right?
Right, exactly.
That kind of write-up is exactly the kind of write-up that I would receive in an email working on a job from some overseeing boss that I have never probably met. So maybe depending on the kind of job that I'm in, might even be from a client that's like 3 times removed from the company I'm working for. That's the same information that I would generally get about describing like here's what we want the thing to look like, right? So I take that, I sit down, and then I spend 3 or 4 hours sketching up, coloring, and putting together. And from that, I might generate 3 or 4 different little things, right? That kind of thing. And so like I hand draw all of that. I hand color all of that. Sometimes some artists don't even do that. They then go to their Mac or their iPad and they use something like Sketch to do that, right? But they're still putting in the same work that they would do on any other job. The difference is that that prompt is coming from a AI as opposed to a client or a boss that I still don't have any emotional connection to, right? And like I think that when we start
Yeah,
talking
but they
about
at
like
least have
art,
emotions, Sejohn. Like
right,
that.
right. But
I'm
that's
kidding. I'm
but
kidding.
I think when we start to talk about art, I think that's where people start to get a little kind of offended by that idea, right?
Mhm.
But I think that one thing you need to remember is that all of these artists working on film and television and all that stuff, they're still just doing jobs. It's that problem that people have where they think that just because it's art, people need to throw their entire self at it. No, you don't have to do that. You can still make good art and still like there are plenty of people that churn out 20 movies a year working behind the scenes that put care and love into all of them and there is definite like hope and love and all of that stuff, human emotion because there is a human doing that work just because they were told how to do it by a machine isn't really any different, right? And this is where we can start to have the scary
Yeah.
conversations about like, okay, what parts of the process can be replaced then? But the problem is that that's not how people are talking about this stuff, right? They're not getting to this conclusion by going down the path you and I just went down.
Right.
They're just hearing that machines are involved, machines bad. And we gotta stop that because like there's so much technological advancement over the last 20 years, specifically in the field of film, if we want to just focus it on that, that like why is this the line? Why is this the line and not this, because again, 30 years ago, if you were having this conversation about how I preferred practical effects over CGI, and you now live in this world of like AI bad, I get that path. I get that. I see how you got there. But the amount of people that are happy to sit around and consume Michael Bay and then talk about how they don't want computers involved in their filmmaking is starting to really rub me the wrong way.
Yeah. I mean, 100 years ago, there were people who were like reticent about getting electricity in their houses. Like
Mm-hmm.
electricity was something we're afraid of. We fear change. Change, the meaning of life. Life is all about change. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. That has been the meaning of life in my eyes since I saw the Rocky Horror Picture Show at way too young an age while I was on vacation in North Carolina. I'll say that
Yeah.
100 times any
I
day of
just
the week.
yeah.
Change
I
is
also
sorry.
no, I also think it's an interesting to tie it back into some of the SAG and the writer strike stuff, like them saying that we want AI to have these kinds of limitations in place. I think there's also a lot of gray area there and a lot of kind of confusion around a lot of that stuff as well, because like in a lot of ways, I don't know, it's like the same kind of outcome, right? We weren't treating these people like workers. We were saying, well, it's your art, it's your passion. We can pay you less because you're getting to do the thing you want to do in life. And so we can get away with paying you less because you're going to keep doing this because you love it, right? And then as we found out, no, they went on strike. They said, no, we're not going to just keep doing this just because we love making film doesn't mean we're going to sit here and dance like monkeys for you. You're going to need to pay your dues, right? And it's that same kind of idea of just like we need to remember that these people that create these things, the apps in your hand, the websites that you're looking at, the all of the stuff that you're going through, the mail you're receiving as we go into like the election year and stuff like that, all of that stuff has to be generated by somebody. And we have for too long just been like, no, human hands need to do all the work when we that doesn't need to be the case for everything, right? My my friggin' Kroger coupons, right? That are coming to me. I don't care if they use AI generated text and art on them. Like, who cares? They're Kroger coupons. I don't need those to be beautiful art, right? When we start to talk about things like more impactful emotional art, that's where I think the conversation really should lie. And the problem is that sometimes the artist that's working on the movie that you're watching is the same artist that made those Kroger coupons, because they got to pay them bills. And if this is the way that they work, this is the way that they work. And so we've got to learn to kind of figure out where our line is, what we want to consume, how we want to consume it, but we cannot just reject it outright. It is too I don't want to say helpful, because like I understand that also rubs people kind of the wrong way, but it is too useful for us to just throw it out the window. But we need to have some more delicate conversations about where the line is. And I feel like a lot of the stuff going on around this particular movie is not being handled delicately. There's way too many people being super heavy-handed with their language, and you know, we're also getting down to the point that like the internet is also just too mean. Like, and I hate that.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other problem.
A whole other kettle of fish. I gave that guy a soda because he asked me for a soda. Why the fuck would you do that? That's the internet
exactly.
meanness. That's exactly to tie it together. I mean, but last thing, as much as I want to talk about these films, while we're talking about it, in terms of AI generated art, it has become a weird epidemic on the internet. And I've seen it jump to real life, where like an artist alley at any sort of comic convention or like media, any sort of convention, right, where you have an artist alley, there are those booths that are people who are selling AI generated art and making a profit. I mean, a lot of people are noticing it, but it doesn't stop the fact that there are still some people like, wow, that's a really good drawing. They don't care that all this person did was put it together with a prompt and then print it out and then transport it there. They want that art to hang up on their wall. So that's happening. Right. But then online, the bigger epidemic, like DeviantArt, right? Yes, it's called DeviantArt, so maybe it's for deviants, but it's also one of the largest art sharing sites on the internet, right? Where people can draw stuff and have free access to post it up where other people could find it, right? Sure. It's kind of the YouTube of drawn images. And they do like mixed media on there as well. Yes, warts and all. But what DeviantArt has seen over the last 2 years is this uptick of AI art, and a lot of that AI art, because they offer subscriptions just like YouTube, is locked away behind being a subscriber to that artist. And what that artist is doing is generating AI art. Now, some of those individuals are having stuff generated and then they are editing it and making sure it looks good or using it as like the starting point before they create a piece. But there is so much.
Are they being clear that it's AI generated, or is the issue that they're not saying that? So
we're not even talking about that. Every AI art piece that I have seen does say generated using and then the artificial intelligence client, right?
Okay.
Because there are a bunch of those. That's not where the problem is. The problem is there's no like stopgap to prove that you did any sort of work with it. You could just be having an AI. But if you tell me
that it's AI generated and I pay you, I can't be mad that I walk in and it's AI generated, right?
Exactly. But it's the amount of time that goes in, and it's like that's become sort of a new art scam on the internet. And I don't mean to say that, right? But like any tool, people will find the nefarious uses for said tool, right? And it's just one of those situations as people are using it as a side hustle to generate AI art. It's $5 to subscribe and see all of my art, but here's a smattering of the best ones. And then they get that $5 from you. And, you know, DeviantArt is fine with it because they're getting money off the top. I mean, the big shift that we saw there was when Taylor Swift was pretty upset with how she was being used in AI-generated media. Like where she was the girl getting banged by the football team or anything like that.
Right. I mean, it was just straight up pornographic material is what we're talking about at that point. Right. Yeah.
But as a result of that and the fact that she was trying to take it to court and get it done, there was a big kibosh on like DeviantArt and other art sites online. Like Twitter did a whole thing about it too, or X, formerly Twitter, did this whole thing where using like AI generated celebrity content would get you straight permabanned, your account deleted from all of these platforms. And that has sort of been a good thing overall, right? That, you know, pornographic imagery of Taylor Swift is not allowed on here. You can't create and profit off of these actors, right? That's like the whole thing they struck for. But then it was Taylor Swift who ended up doing that. But also, then I think about in terms of art, what's stopping me from like drawing Taylor Swift in a compromising thing? Like, is that still allowed out there, or because anything that's inspired by a celebrity is now illegal? Like, I don't understand how you draw that line.
I mean, but that's something that people have dealt with for years. You know,
Yeah,
like if somebody was animating or editing photos back in the day and putting out that kind of stuff, people would get in trouble for that kind of shit. I mean, essentially, it falls under like libel and slander law at that point, right?
yeah,
And that's
that makes
honestly
sense.
something that we severely lack here in the United States, but over across the pond, it's a huge thing over in Europe and stuff. Which is why honestly, a lot of those kinds of cases get brought over there as opposed to popping up over here. So like there are systems in place that could be implemented in those in that regard, right, for that kind of stuff. But again, I'd be hard pressed to side with a person who paid $5 on DeviantArt to go look at an artist that is outwardly saying I use AI to generate art, and then walking in and being pissed at the art. If they say, "Oh, there's not enough of you in these now that I've seen them," I get that conversation, and that's fine. But like, you don't get to be like, "I was tricked, I was swindled." Like, no, like you were openly told AI was involved. You gave money to see AI art, and you're looking at AI art. I don't see where the breakdown in communication came from, really. But I will say the last thing I will probably say about this, because we should talk about some other stuff besides just ranting about this for yet another episode. But we also we live in postmodern times as far as the art we consume is concerned, right? And a large part of that is that we are much more interested in the concept of process, meaning that like it's not just that a piece exists, but learning how it exists, or like why it exists, how it was created, the work that went into it. And look no further than the millions of artist YouTube channels that are just literally cameras pointed at them as they build furniture, as they draw comics, as they paint pictures, things like that, right? I mean, this is something that we've been into for a long
Oh yeah.
time. We think about Bob Ross, right, and that whole like thing. But it has definitely amped up in the last 20 years, especially because of things like YouTube and stuff like that. Watching artists create the art is now just as big of a product as the final product itself, right? And so I do think there is something also to be said about that, about why we care so much about the whole kind of concept of AI, is because we care about process. And so like I think that it's maybe on some of these AI artists out there that if they really want to try and start legitimizing it, they need to start being more open about what their processes are, right? Are they spending hours of a time at a time afterwards cleaning up stuff that they're getting from Chat GPT, or are they spending more of their time on the front end generating prompts so that they can have a larger scale output? But then like what is the concept behind that output? Like you got to talk to me about what you were thinking instead of doing that, right? So we need more of these quote unquote AI artists to like I'm only putting quotes around it because part of this is about legitimizing it, and we're not there yet, right? Once we get there, I'll take the quotes off. But like this idea that if we want to start looking at this as a legit kind of artistic process, we need to see more people be open about what that process actually is. And we can argue to the end of the day whether or not that's fair, but that is where we're at with this stuff, right? And so until we see more people do that, I don't think people are ever going to really kind of change their tune on this sort of stuff. And the problem with that is that the environment is so toxic for anybody working with AI right now that who the hell is going to put their self on the line like that? Somebody needs to, and I will bow to the first person that truly does. But like the people that want to kind of get out there and get in front of a crowd and say like, this is what I do, this is how I create the thing I create, and I succeed at it. That's the other thing, is it needs to be a successful person. It can't be some guy that's just generating a bunch of stuff and like making like beer money off of it. We need to see somebody that's like, this is my career. This is how I do my job. This is how I feed my family, is working in this way, and I work at this pace, and I work with these tools, and I do this. Once people start to see kind of that side of it, I think more people will be able to be better informed in these conversations, and it won't be such a headache listening to people just spout a bunch of just awful nonsense at artists just trying to friggin' make a buck.
Yeah, it's true. We do need to have that like curtain opened. And the only reason I bring up like that people on DeviantArt can do that, if you're somebody who is still creating on your own without the AI and you're up against this deluge of people who are creating that art that way, I understand why there's some discouragement in pursuing art for art's sake.
Yeah, well, and that's when it becomes really important to emphasize your process, right? Like if you're the kind of person that is not using AI, like is staunchly saying, I don't employ it in what I do, that's, show me what you do then. Impress me. Like, and again, it's unfortunate that's the kind of next step that you need to take, right? We used to live in a time where people could just look at a thing and appreciate it for the beauty that it was, but that's just not where we are with anything anymore. I blame DVD, but like extra features, right? We got so used to behind the scene tidbits and pieces and bits and bobs that now we need it for everything in our life.
Yeah, I mean it's cooking shows and things like that. The original reality television, right?
Yeah,
like you can learn how to cook with it, and then you can just watch and see how it was made. Like it's
right.
It's a weird thing. It's definitely a lineage worth tracking, but again, we've done a lot here. I got these 3 coins in my hand, Sejohn, and I want to throw one into the fountain. I've generated using wheelofnames.com a thing I'm going to spin, and then we'll go from there, okay? It's as random as I can make it. So let's see what we're talking about. Wheel of reality. Turn, turn, turn. Talk us the movie we're talking about. Cool. We're talking about the middle one that I want, the cream in the cookie sandwich, and one that I'm pretty sure you've seen, so that should be fun. You know what I watched last night for the first time? Because I finally got there? Take a guess. Take a guess. I finally caught up with something. I needed to catch up with something before viewing this film.
Oh.
I think it is.
I don't know, John Wick 4?
No. I saw John Wick 4 on release date. I finished Resident Evil 4, and then I saw John Wick 4. It was my weekend of 4s. No, it was the Bob's Burgers movie. Because I had not seen it. Because we had a plan during the pandemic to watch an episode of Bob's Burgers a day to catch up. Because Dale had never seen the show. And we're going to catch up, and then when the movie finally comes, we'll be ready to see the movie. And then that didn't that didn't happen. We got through about like 8 episodes of season 9, and then we just stopped watching it. It was too overwhelming to Dale. I don't know why. Maybe it was like this reminder of what the outside world was like. This was like peak pandemic 2020 stuff, where I'm like, if we do an episode of Bob's Burgers a day, we'll catch up, and then we'll just stay caught up for when the film comes out. We didn't do it, so we started like November of last year. We're going to watch through everything again because we're insane people. So we watched through all of Bob's Burgers again. And then yesterday, when we finished the 12th episode, Some Like It Bot parts 1 and 2, it was like, we're watching the movie. But here's the rub. The rub has to be mentioned first before we talk about the ribs. The rub is, it was like taken off of free viewing on Max and Hulu and stuff like within the last couple of weeks. So we finally caught up, time to view it, and it's not available anymore. So we ended up buying it. Dale's like, I care, I'm going to buy this. Bought it for like UHD. It was only $20, which is like a good thing, right? Because we're seeing, here's another thing. We're not going into it this episode, but physical media, not just video games, but movies, sort of hitting the limited run games like model of limited edition physical copies of your movies being the only way to get them. Now, I'm not loving it, Siege. I'm really not loving it.
I mean, I'll take full responsibility for this. I feel completely responsible. But like there was that moment. I think this was early days of this show. I think there's recorded conversation of me talking about this.
Yeah.
There was a shift in me and people in our friend groups that were like me, where we used to own hundreds of DVDs. Right. We would just have bookshelves and boxes and stored away like any collector. Like we would just have tons and tons and tons of DVDs, most of which were not getting watched, most of which were probably, some of which were probably not even working because of various issues. I had stuff that was like wrong region because like I really wanted this particular copy of Spaced and got it and then realized I didn't play on any of my DVD players, that kind of shit, right? Like there was just too much. So there was a culling. And then from that, there was a decision that going forward, I cannot just purchase any DVD. First of all, I don't have the money anymore. I don't have the time, and also the physical space, and also just like I was changing I was becoming more of an adult. I was becoming more refined. Let's put it. That's the best way
I
of
was
putting
spending
it.
my money on snifters of brandy, not DVDs of honey.
Well, we hit a point where go back, it's the same line between VHS and DVD that eventually as society, we hit a point where like we just couldn't look at VHS anymore because the quality was just kind of meh. And now it's a style to like show us something in that way, right? Which is cool. Things come around in waves. And I was hitting the same point with like Blu-ray versus DVD. I've been watching Blu-rays enough now that like if it's not this nice high quality Blu-ray version, then I don't really want to watch it. I was better off checking to see if it was on a streaming service and getting it in better quality through a streaming service than I was putting a DVD into my PlayStation, that kind of move, right? So I definitely had a moment where I talked about how going forward, the only thing I'm going to do is if it's a special edition box set or something, like it has to be an important movie, and then on top of that, it has to be an important version of that movie. I'm not just going to go out and just buy the whatever the shovelware like Blu-ray like version of this thing that's out on shelves right now, because I'm gonna wait. It's a good way to pace myself for my wallet. It's a good way to pace myself for my storage space. I'm only going to purchase things that are in this vein. And like I feel like I'm not the only one that got to that point, right? Even within our friends group, we had a friend in college that like his dorm room was basically just his bed and boxes of DVDs. And like, God bless the man, going to his place was like being able to go to like a video library, anything you wanted. The Library of Congress should get in touch and see if he had anything special, that kind of move, right? But I think even he has kind of dialed back as well, right? It was just kind of this big move that we as a culture made because we got too big too fast, and we realized that we didn't want to be the guy that had the closets full of DVDs anymore, right? So I'm not too surprised that that's where we're kind of getting at, and of course it's an overcorrection in the market now. Nothing's available anywhere, right?
So and the only way you can get anything is these $100 special editions. Hope you were there right when the store opened because we only got 2.
Or you're ordering online from places like Amazon or direct from places like Criterion or Arrow and that sort of shit. Yeah.
And like also we're at this point where like Best Buy got rid of its physical media section. Target, Walmart, they're all following suit with that. So it will only be something you can sort of special order directly from the producers because they want us to go to digital, but not streaming digital where you buy this license and you have it as long as we say you're able to have it.
Yeah, except then you don't really have it, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's all sorts of stuff. Can I legally make a copy of this thing that I licensed out? No, you can't do that. Right? Which is still what we're seeing with Nintendo, and it's like steady knocking on doors of emulation partners. Because once there are no more emulators, why will people be creating ROMs? Back to Bob's Burgers, the movie. You've seen it, right? Have you seen the film?
I actually have not. I've not gotten caught up to it yet.
So, the animation is friggin' gorgeous. And I won't say too much since you haven't seen it. I thought you might have. I won't spoil anything about the story. But what I will say is, we've talked about it. You can go listen to our very special episode on the Simpsons movie. The Simpsons movie felt like a cinematic Simpsons experience. My quick review of Bob's Burgers, the Bob's Burgers movie, is that it just feels like a long episode.
I've heard that levied against it, and I will say that it's a criticism that doesn't really offend me. Like, okay, I
I
cool.
Still had a
You're
blast
right,
watching
like,
it.
When you can,
like,
I will when I get to it. Like, the family is also in the process of watching through Bob's Burgers, and we again are waiting until we get to that point, right?
Of course,
but maybe to your point, it is we have not pushed ourselves, right? Like that kind of thing. But yeah, that that's an interesting because part of it is that it got caught up in a bunch of like timeline stuff, right? Didn't it keep getting pushed back, and then it got pushed into the friggin' pandemic, right? Wasn't that like wasn't that part of it? Am I misremembering the story of that?
It got pushed into the pandemic. It was supposed to be released in 2020, and then it got pushed back. And I have to give them kudos because they knew what was going to happen in that freaking movie, and like because movies are like any animated show that you're watching. It's why South Park and the fact that they can do an episode in 7 days is so impressive, why it can feel so culturally relevant. Though, of course, you don't really go back and revisit South Park's because of that, like, finger on the pulse way of it.
It's a double-edged sword.
It's a weird sort of thing. It doesn't have the greatest shelf life because of that. Most animated shows that you're watching are, like, made 2 years before they hit air, right? So that's a thing to know. So they do, like, some really interesting foreshadowing to things that happen in the movie that I was afraid, because of exactly what you're talking about, that the foreshadowing was actually stuff that had happened as a result of events in the movie. Because I knew that the timeline, it had existed and it kept getting pushed back, I was afraid that little things that I was noticing, then when the movie started, I'm like, oh, those things could be like outcome of what's happening in the movie right now.
Well, because traditionally in these kinds of movies, we do see those, like, when a animated show takes the opportunity to make a movie, they usually use that kind of cred in order to not rewrite the show, but make big changes. Like, the biggest example I can think of is the Rugrats movie introducing Baby Dill, right?
Yes,
and that
exactly.
becoming a large part of the later seasons of Rugrats is that he has this little brother. And like that's a huge thing. And then to that point, the second movie introducing Chucky's stepsister, right? And that kind of stuff. Like so like Rugrats, a show that did this twice, now that I'm thinking about it, where they used their movie releases to really make some pretty drastic changes to the structure of that show, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I was afraid of. I mean, I think of, like, the Simpsons movie to keep using it. It's, like, sort of the best example, because as much as Bob's Burgers, the movie, in terms of adult animated film, right? Like, Family Guy had Stewie, Bigger, Longer, The Untold Story, blah, blah, blah. But now we know that was just kind of 3 episodes stitched together.
Right. Famously, I was going to say, we kind of famously knew at the time that what they were the 3 episodes that weren't allowed to air, so they were kind of stitched together as a movie
yeah,
experience. Yeah.
Or like looking at something like the Futurama movies, because they were straight to DVD. I feel those were made better as complete films and then carved up to be the 4 episodes that made up the 24 episodes of the 6th season of Futurama.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Well, and a lot of this stuff is all kind of what we picked up while we were watching the stuff in college. So God knows if any of this is true. But what the impression that I always had with those was that they wanted to make these movies, and they were basically told, you can make them, but we are going to cut them up. So there is like the slightest bit of effort to put in like a commercial break or like an episode break moment. But at the end of the day, they are complete stories. So like, yeah, I just think it's a different approach. Whereas I feel like Family Guy was legit just like, we have these 3 episode ideas. We don't know how to fit them in anywhere because they're going to offend a bunch of people. So let's just do this instead. Yeah. That kind of thing. like the approach was very different, right? I'm interested, like, in the Simpsons movie, like referencing that. I think like Colin, Lisa's boyfriend from the movie, sticks around for a little bit afterwards, but even he is now gone. Is there really much from the Simpsons movie that really affects what goes on in the Simpsons?
No, because of the Simpsons, the fact that they have the moving timeline. What I was going to reference, though, is the season 19 premiere episode. It is Bart skateboarding through a Springfield that has been destroyed by the dome.
Right.
And that, like, that opening sequence showing, like, Springfield did feel some effect, but this is kind of montaged through to everything is normal again, was very coolly handled for a show that, like, is not going to take anything going forward. Bob's Burgers is kind of more interested in continuity, and I don't know if that's because it's Lauren Bouchard behind it or anything like that, but it does, like, when Louise redid her bedroom, I would have been upset if her bedroom wasn't redone going forward, and was happy that it was. So that's it. I mean, like, the movie was still enjoyable, even though I say that it feels like a big episode. And specifically, it feels like a couple of episodes that were already a 2-parter just kind of got a new coat of paint. Which again, we knew about the timeline and the pushing and everything like that. So there's a real good chance that 2-part episode was originally the script for the movie, and then it got pushed down the line. So that's what they started from. Still very enjoyable, but like as something that I had been looking forward to for a while, I mean, the animation is gorgeous. Like I cannot
Yeah, yeah,
emphasize
yeah. But
how
anticipation could
freaking
be a
good.
killer,
Yeah,
man.
exactly.
Like
And
the
that's
fact that it got. I mean, it's part of the reason why so many artists were really concerned about their projects getting pushed during the pandemic. Is
yeah.
like on top of this, we're building up a lot of this like anticipation for a thing that I do love, but now there's so much more weight on it as we come back into it. Yeah,
And I think that might be why we're having such difficulty with certain projects.
yep,
Looking at the
100%, man.
MCU, looking at the DCEU. But yeah,
Well, and
so
honestly, it's one of the things that really impressed me as much as it did for the goofy ass movie that it is, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. After everything, that movie was in production for 8 years before it came out. Pandemic aside, like that was definitely part of that 8 years.
yeah.
But even before that, right? And so this idea that when this movie finally came out, it was actually also a fun experience was like that was a win for me. Like I was like, oh, and it's also something that like I enjoyed my time with. Hell yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I still haven't caught that one, but yeah. So in terms of Bob's Burgers, something that was there, it was a perfect sort of connective tissue between the two other movies that I'm going to be talking about. It's still worth watching, especially if you're a fan of the series. I was a little bit disappointed that it didn't like take the opportunity to do like a big cinematic thing. But also,
Yeah.
I mean, that's Bob's Burgers, right? Like, and I think that's what might stand out is that like it is sort of like a smaller scale show, Bob's Burgers, in a lot of ways. All the fantasy is like imagination. So then there are some moments in the film that are like, well, this feels like a little too big for Bob's Burgers. It was a difficult line that they were walking. So the fact that
Yeah.
I can walk away saying I enjoyed my time and I'd recommend it to others really does feel like a win for the movie.
It's Bouchard's first movie, right? Like
I
there isn't any other project I can think of that they've had in
think
the.
so. Let's
So I mean that's also part of it. Is
Part
you're
of it.
also watching kind of a first time filmmaker on top of trying to balance that teeter totter that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, cool stuff, man. I'm glad to hear that you still found some enjoyment in it because I'm sure I will when we get to it too. It's just yeah, it was the kind of movie that I don't know if it's because of the behind the scenes stuff happening with it getting pushed so much that kind of drove it out of my mind, but I just kind of stopped like tracking it because like I just like I did with a lot of things during the pandemic.
Right. Which honestly, no one would blame you for that. I'm just checking. Yeah, everything. It is the first movie that they definitely directed. So there you go. And it's enjoyable. I do still recommend it. Let's go back to the wheel and spin it. Now, Sejohn, do you want whatever gets chosen is what gets talked about, or gets saved for last? Let's involve you in this choice right here.
Uh, I feel like we're putting a hat on a hat. If it lands on the wheel, let's talk about it.
All right, spinning the wheel. Wheel of reality. Turn, turn, turn. Tell us the movie that we're going to talk about. Wanna, wanna, wanna. What are we going to talk about? Ghostbusters! Frozen Empire.
Okay.
Sejohn, I mean, just a little bit of backup on this one for the people listening at home. I told Sejohn that when I saw the movie, because Sejohn and I, we had a little side bet. We talked about it earlier here about whether or not I'd finally see the Borderlands trailer, because I was thinking that's something that's going to play before Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Mm-hmm. And it did. And oh my God, am I excited for that movie. Though I did not know that friggin' Jamie Lee Curtis is Tannis. Had no idea that she was Tannis. I knew that Kevin Hart was Roland.
It's phenomenal casting. Even the Kevin Hart stuff. There's some people that are having some feelings about Kevin Hart playing Roland. I don't mind it. I mean, like I actually like the guy. So like I'm coming from a place where I don't really necessarily get all of the weird Cat Williams hate on the guy right now. But
I mean, it's some of his beliefs and some of the stuff they know about his like it's stand up beef that happens there. But then also some of the jokes he made that are like anti-gay, anti-trans, and
Kevin Hart, you mean?
Kevin Hart, yeah.
Yeah. No,
so I mean, like
it's like yeah, there's definitely people that have like
there's foundation,
legitimate reasons to not be into him, but like the switch we've gone from, it's the same thing that happens with all these major celebs. It happened to like Jennifer Lawrence is like the other big one I think of and shit like that, where like we see them in a lot of stuff and then all of a sudden there's this whole huge wave pushing against them being in a lot of stuff, and I think we're in that moment for him right now. So it's kind of hard to like talk about Borderlands and not just address that real quick, especially because gearing it more towards the quote unquote art of the thing, Roland is like this big beefy dude that is kind of the biggest of the original four. Well, he's not the biggest of the original four. Brick is, but like he's definitely supposed to be bigger than, for instance, Lilith, right?
Yeah.
And like putting Kevin Hart up against Kate Winslet. Kate Winslet is just this like powerhouse, like in terms of size and ability and things. It's like, yeah, we're not setting him up for a win here, right? But yeah, no, the movie looks like it's going to be super fun. The ways in which it's playing with a lot of the Borderlands lore, it's definitely not telling the traditional story. But did you see it? That's my question. If you saw the preview I saw, there is a moment where there is shall we say a logo that appears that you're just like, that's the end of the movie. That's
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there was a bunch of, well, we're talking about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and Siege, we need a new term, because where the Sejohn's Gambit is talking about your movie, like showing the final scene in the movie in the trailer is what a Sejohn's Gambit is. What if the entire movie's marketing campaign is the last 30 minutes of the film?
Oh, that's just called bad marketing.
Right?
That's called the bait and switch. That's called the rug pull. Yeah.
And that's what Frozen Empire does. But let's So I saw the Borderlands trailer. I'm super excited for it. In terms of like video game adaptation, getting excited. Ghostbusters was seen by myself and my sister, and our mother, myself, and my sister. We were the three who went and saw Ghostbusters on Friday.
You want to take a swing at that sentence, bud?
So I saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire with my mom and my sister. The three of us saw the movie. I'm so sorry I don't know what happened. I've been up since 5 a.m. and I drove to a train station. And then I watched freaking Roadhouse, which is the third movie. Spoilers. I may have already said it. Anywho. So Borderlands, well then, like, my mother, like, I have no interest in that. And it's like, well, why would you have interest in it? The only thing that might pull you in is the fact that Cate Blanchett is in the movie. Like, nothing else is...
Cate Blanchett, not Winslet. Thank you.
Cate Blanchett. Yeah, it's all right. I wasn't sure, and I was going to get there. But also, to talk about the whole Roland of it all, the fact that anybody can be playing... I'm really looking at it as, like, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, Next Level type stuff, where, like, the character, like, that's them in the avatar role. In a lot of ways. So, like, for Roland to be, like,
wild, and, like,
yeah, it looks
if
crazy.
At some point it pulled back, well, if at some point it literally zoomed out to, like, Eli Roth sitting on his couch playing his Xbox, like, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. If that's how it starts, if that's how it ends, like, well, I got the sequel at the end credits, who knows? Very excited. Also saw the trailer for Beetlejuice. I really love that when we're doing sequels to movies that are like more than 30 years old, we take the iconic song and have it sung slowly by a child choir. Like, that's how we're going to do it.
It's a good move.
That's the move. But I mean, I'm going to see Beetlejuice. Even though I'm not one of these people who has always been clamoring for a sequel, it just feels like one of those things that, like, I just kind of want to be part of the discussion on it. I don't want to.
I adore the first movie. So, like, and to the point where, like,
too. It's great.
I was kind of excited when I first heard about the original sequel that never came.
That never happened.
Right? Like, Beetlejuice does Hawaii or something like that.
Beetlejuice goes Hawaiian.
Yeah. Like that kind of shit. Like, I don't know. I'm excited, but I'm at a point in my life where I temper my expectations for everything nowadays.
Exactly.
Right? So
yeah, and that's where I am. But, like, it's fun to see that trailer. There was a trailer for the Spy X Family movie, which was really cool.
Wild.
Like, okay, before Ghostbusters, and then the Civil War trailer, which we need to talk about the movie Civil War, but not now. It's just still seems like a weird fucking time to be making a movie about.
It's interesting you say that. The only review that I've read from it was somebody on the AP News, and the exact headline was a movie ahead of its time that has come way too late.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, okay.
Yeah, no, it's like the trailer just makes me feel dirty in a lot of ways, but yeah, that's the other one we saw. So then we'll get to Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And as I already talked about, bit spoilerly, all of the marketing for that movie has only been scenes from the last 30 minutes of the film. Wow. So I understand why people might be disappointed in it. Personally, there was a moment where I was watching the movie, and spoilers for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I don't know if you're ever going to see it. And we're going to go back to it, but I just want to get this part out of the way. There's a moment where I'm watching the movie, and the movie is slow. The movie is research-based. The movie is what I love about a Ghostbusters film. Like, all of that happens. It's not just fighting ghosts. It is, oh, we did this investigation at this place, and now we're looking into this, and what is this artifact that we found? Who is this person that brought us this artifact? Being a Ghostbuster is only like 25% busting ghosts. You look at Ray and Egon, right? And they're research scientists who want to understand the paranormal better, right? And then you have Venkman, who like kind of just wants to skate through life. And the fact that like he can do this, say that he's a scientist, he's really he's like the guy in the group project in high school who's getting the A even though Egon and Ray are doing all the work, but he's the one on presentation day that's going to be able to present in a manner that engages the audience, right?
Yeah, you need a face man. Yeah,
he's the face of the Busters, right? The voice, a lot of the time, is what it is. And then you have Winston, who is literally just an employee, though the way that the particular Ghostbusters cinematic universe has done, he's now a rich philanthropist who is funding all of the Ghostbuster stuff. He's gotten his doctorate,
he's the money man
now. Where before he was just like, we need another guy because we've got a lot of work going on.
Also, there's an awful lot of white people in this movie. So I love Ernie Hudson, and he's
fantastic. I love
his role. Like that was not serious about that comment. I hope everybody understands that. But there's something that in what you're saying that I really latch onto, right? Like I really love this idea that like. We talked about this a lot when we talked about the first two movies way back in the day. But this idea that the busting part, right, where they become basically exterminators, right, the blue collar job aspect of it that I love so much, is only because they need the money for
to continue their research
and all that. They don't go into this business hoping to bust ghosts. They go into it just hoping to prove ghosts are real. It just becomes this thing of like, oh, they're real and they're dangerous, so we need to do something about that, right? Like they step up in a way, which is really fun, right? Like it's this idea that we get to see these guys kind of in a fish out of water situation, in that like they go in as these nerds thinking they're going to just like research this thing, and then lo and behold they find out they need to do something to stop it. It's Indiana Jones. It's all these kinds of movies that we just love.
It's that stuff that Sejohn loves.
Where you always
have
regular
these
guys that are in over their heads.
Regular guy
up against a paranormal
extraordinary
situation.
Circumstances. Like it's great. It's very enjoyable. It's what connects to that first movie, and it is why in Ghostbusters 2 they have to get knocked down a few rungs. They can't be beloved anymore because at the heart of it, like they're just scientists who are trying to make it. The best scene in the first Ghostbusters, and there are many very good scenes, but it is when they're at the Sedgwick Hotel and the guy's like, how much is this going to cost? And Egon in the background, who does the books and knows what they need for research, is signaling to Venkman how much money he should say they need from this guy. Right? Like that scene is so good, and also proves the fact that like, even though Venkman ate chips and drank all of our beer while we were doing the project, he's still an important part of this team. He still knows what's going on, to the point where like we can wordlessly say how we're going to get this guy to fund our research for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
Like it's this great thing. So when the movie is such heavy research, and like we're going to the old New York library where like the special books are kept and all things like that, that is exciting. That's the part of Ghostbusters I love. The busting, I mean, there's only so many ways you can do zap it, cap it, trap it, right? Like there's not a lot of variation on that. But I think that there is some disappointment from people that the film is so slow moving, and a big part of it, as Sejohn said, not yet say vocabulary, maybe we'll have to come up with a fluffier, fruitier term for it, but like bad marketing is to show only action in this movie that is 75% freaking research and trying to prevent something, and then when they're unable to do that, how they're going to react.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a shame. I gotta say, this is the most endearing write up I've heard about the movie since it came out. Honestly, there's not been a lot of great press about it. It is doing pretty well. Like it's got like an 85% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which is what the best that a movie could hope for nowadays, right?
Yeah.
The critic rating is not doing great, and so I've seen a lot more of that because that's just what's in front of my eyeballs more often, and like and some of the stuff saying that like it's a little messy, it's a little all over the place, it's a little too slow paced, and then when it does get actiony, it's everything that you like you said, you've already seen it in the trailers. The other big thing is that it feels much more family adventure. Like it keeps getting they keep calling it a family adventure film. Every review I keep reading about it, and that's just not the genre that I think of when I think of Ghostbusters. I guess I don't know.
Horror
But
comedy
like
is what most people call Ghostbusters, a la something like Beetlejuice. But I don't know. I mean, it doesn't feel like they just all work together. Like as much as there is a family at the center of this film, like Ray Stantz is not part of the family.
Well,
Zedmore
but I think
is
the
not
problem
part
is
of,
not
like,
necessarily this film, right? I
Yeah.
think the bit what it seems, and this is I have not seen the movie. This is going off of how people are kind of taking the movie in. It seems like what is happening is that the last movie set up this much more family adventure style. Ghostbusters Afterlife set up this much more family oriented, family style like movie, and the fact that this movie tries to carry that on, but also at the same time doesn't want to be that, is where some of the juxtaposition is not working for people.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that it's not enough, it can't seem to decide if it wants to be that or not, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, it's true. It does kind of feel like it's of two worlds. I get where people would say that. I wish it were more of a focus on Ghostbusters, but there is still this whole storyline in there of like the kid who feels, but like a lot of that stems from actual work issues as well. Like it's handled in this really very intelligent way that I like was not expecting from it. This was a movie that I had after Afterlife no interest in seeing Frozen Empire. In fact, when I told somebody I was seeing Ghostbusters, like I took off work and I'm seeing Ghostbusters, their response is like, I can't believe they made a third. I said I call it Ghostbusters 4. They said they call it Ghostbusters Cold, and I'm like, well, I'm just calling it Ghostbusters 4. And he's like, oh, and how do people feel about that? And I'm like, it kind of upsets some people that I'm not using the subtitle. And really, the anger was just from the subtitle. And the person I was talking to was like, oh yeah, because like the one with the female Ghostbusters, like a lot of people probably don't consider that the third movie. And I'm like, no, Afterlife is the third movie. So this would actually be Ghostbusters 5 if they were all in a shared continuity. And I kid you not, Sejohn, it was like one of those moments where it gets real quiet in the club and you could hear a pin drop as this person realized he missed a Ghostbusters film. And then I'm like, it's okay that you missed a Ghostbusters film. You missed Ghostbusters Afterlife. And I got thoughts about that movie.
Yeah.
And the fact that like Sejohn will probably never see Ghostbusters Afterlife. I don't want to speak for you, but based on everything that you've said, I would be very surprised if you ever came to me and said, so I saw Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Yeah, I've hit a point, and maybe this is because a lot of the issues that I have with that movie still to this day, I still have those issues, were things like I didn't love the way that Jason Reitman was kind of approaching talking about making the movie, plus then some of the choices that were made to not make it, as Ghostbustery as I like, and we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is soothed by time. I know what the movie is now, right? So I'm not so caught up in that aspect of it. On top of that, my money, if I go to watch the movie now, is not going to directly find its way to somebody like Jason Reitman, who said some things that I didn't love. And it wasn't like offensive shit that like I'm not saying he should be canceled, but like I just disagree heavily with the ways in which he kind of approached talking about Answer the Call versus what he wanted to do with Afterlife and stuff. And the mere fact that he even really wanted to address it was weird to me, and that sort of thing. But if I go and watch the movie now, the odds of him getting my $20 that he would have gotten when it came out have diminished immensely, right? So I also don't mind. Like, so I'm of the mind at this point where if somebody were with me in a room and was like, we should watch this movie, I would sit down and watch it. But I am never going to go out of my way and put it in front of I'm not going to be the one.
You're not going to be the one, right?
And
I get that, right? Maybe 20 years down the line, if we're still say reporting, it gets a VSE, right? And that'll be the first time Sejohn watches it through his cataracts and all of that. Knock on wood.
Through my cataracts.
But yeah,
not a weed I smoke. I'm never going to get glaucoma. Go ahead. Sorry.
But yes, so like that was an eye-opening thing. And that's really been what I've seen with this film, is that a lot of people didn't even know another Ghostbusters movie was coming out, let alone having any sort of excitement for this film. So that's been really interesting. But I'd like to, and I will give myself like 5 minutes, just full spoiler territory, and I'll give a warning, but I am going to ask for Sejohn's permission before I do that. Because there's one thing. Okay. So as of the 134-minute mark on the podcast, I'm going to start spoilering. That's 20 seconds to go away. And it's only going to be 5 minutes. So you can rejoin at 139. That is the promise to you. You have 10 seconds to go away before I spoil a pretty big part about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoilers. All right. So here's a storyline that's happening in Frozen Empire. The bad ghost, the ice ghost, is like Garakas or something like that. I do not remember the name because it literally feels like AI generated content, the name of the villain in the Ghostbusters movie. It is not like memorable in any sort of way. Okay. So that's like a problem with it. But the big story in this is that Phoebe Spangler, played by McKenna Grace, is benched because she is 15 years old and she's too young to be handling an unlicensed proton accelerator. So the opening portion of the movie, they're catching like a Hell's Kitchen sewer dragon, and she leans out of the gunner's seat of Ecto-1. She catches it, but they cause some damage through downtown Manhattan trying to catch this ghost. They're brought in front of the mayor, who is none other than, bigger spoilers, Walter Peck, who has become the mayor.
Man has no dick.
Right? He is the mayor of New York City in this movie. And as much as he wants to shut down the Ghostbusters, it's kind of difficult because they did just stop this ghost, right? However, he's going to do whatever he can to fuck up this team, and he benches Phoebe Spangler. So she is unable to go be a Ghostbuster, which she loves being. So she goes out at night to play chess in the park for some reason, and a female ghost who just looks like a human ghost, right? Which I kind of dig because the continuity of like not all ghosts are fucking monsters versions, right? She died in a tenement house fire. Her name is Melody. They're playing chess and she's like, "You're not freaking out. Why aren't you freaking out?" She's like, "I'm a Ghostbuster. I fucking know what ghosts exist. I'm not scared of you. I think your flames are cool, blah, 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 blah." So she starts hanging out with this Melody ghost because she can't bust ghosts. But then, while everyone is away on a call, they get a call about a ghost at a diner, and it's Melody. And she goes and she, like, misses on purpose with her proton stream. So, like, these two are forming this little relationship, friendship thing. It's a relationship, right? Phoebe has romantic feelings towards this ghost. It is undeniable that that is how this film is sort of directed. They introduce that the containment unit is failing at the firehouse, which is one of the reasons why Winston wanted to be in charge of it, so that they could watch it and make sure. Because at the former Triborough Aquarium, they have established a full-on Ghostbusters tech team, where like they're experimenting with ghosts. They have like a parabotanist and all these other things that they're doing. And they've built a 400 times larger containment unit based on Spangler's original blueprints for the containment system. And they want to like migrate all of the ghosts over, but to do that trap by trap would take minimum 3 years, closer to 5 years. It's like they're repairing the Washington Bridge over in East Providence.
Right.
So that's like the whole secret of it, right? But while we're at the Ghostbuster Tech headquarters, Phoebe sees this device for removing spirits from possessed objects. Because they do this whole thing about like, any object in the world can kind of trap a ghost if enough emotional attachment is made to that object. So what the device does is it strips the ghost from the object and then puts it in a separate container where it can then be moved into the containment unit. And Phoebe goes, "Have you had any experience trying to like remove a ghost from a living being," right? Living possession removal. And that's the only time that you hear about this at all. So she like is talking to this ghost girl Melody. She's falling in love with her, romantic attachment to this girl. And she's like, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be a ghost. And she talks to Ray and he's like, I'd love to be a ghost. I'd like to know what it feels like to materialize. So there's all this stuff. So then when she is like finally cast out from the family because she tried to bust a ghost again outside of, they go to the New York Library and they're attacked by a possessor ghost that escaped from Ghostbuster Tech headquarters when they lost power briefly. Because like that's the biggest issue with the Ghostbusters, right? Is that if they lose power, the containment grid goes down. Anywho, they go to the New York Library, they get attacked, they get mad, and they're like, I can't believe you're fighting ghosts, we told you not to do it. She's like, no. She goes to Ghostbuster Tech headquarters, and she goes into the machine, and she removes her spirit from her body. And I told people that I'd be done at 39, and that might be a lie. So I'm going to have to pause and tell people that the spoilers aren't over. Come back at 42. And that's going to happen in 3, 2, 1. Hi, you're back, but I'm not done with the spoilers. I'm still Devon Decker, and I'm crazy. And I thought I was going faster than it was. I'm not. So we will see you back at 142, where it will be a spoiler-free zone for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. You have 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Back to spoilers. All right. So she rips her spirit from her body and she sets that like 2-minute timer. And then it looks like she's going to kiss the ghost. And she doesn't kiss the ghost. And that really pisses me off. I wish they had been committal about her kissing the ghost, because it turns out that the whole time that she was like making her fall in love with her, Melody, she's the only member of her family. She started the tenement fire. We find that out. She's the only member of her family who's still a ghost. Everybody else moved on to the other side. So she has made some sort of weird deal with the ice ghost, who's supposed to be trapped in a brass ball, but I guess somehow he has influence, to find a human who can speak the words to break the binding spell on the brass ball. And he promised that he'll send her to the other side if she does that. So, like, he possesses Phoebe, because the ice ghost, in addition to being a crazy fucking ice ghost, can possess any ghost and make them do his bidding. Possesses Phoebe's ghost form, and then makes her say the magic chant to unbind the spell. And for some reason, that makes her living body do it too, because you need a living voice. The whole plot of Garacus is fucking like luck, bubblegum, and Band-Aids stuck together. The thing doesn't make sense. First of all, the possession machine being a flatliner device, where the fuck did that come from?
I was just thinking
right?
that.
And like she sets a little 2-minute timer. She's like, I'll be able to be out of my body for 2 minutes. Nothing happens after those 2 minutes. She just gets sucked back into her body. It's not like flatliners where, like, you know, someone shocks you back to life in any way, shape, or form. It's just like, right. No, this machine knows how to separate your body for a short time. But the real problem is that, like, if she had kissed this ghost that we watch her fall in love with, and then that ghost betrays her, it means so much more. But, like, to leave it ambiguous if she had romantic feelings for this ghost, it just feels like, why didn't you guys commit to this? And the biggest issue with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, there's only 30 seconds left in the spoiler thing, and we gotta go real after that, is like, there's no information about this movie anywhere. There's like 12 trivia items on IMDb, and some of them are like, the firehouse is the same firehouse from Ghostbusters. Like, yep, that's trivia. That's not trivia. Yeah. Like, what the frick is that?
To bring us back, because we got to wrap up the spoiler stuff, but to bring us back to stuff we can talk about, it does feel like the promise of this movie was we are going to get back to what we loved about Ghostbusters, the original film, right? And so, first of all, I guess I have a question. Does it do that?
Yeah. Okay. So, like, the real thing that this movie feels like it does is my biggest complaint about Afterlife, right? And this is before the whole, I've had conversations with people online. I've read theories on it, on the 4 universes of Ghostbusters. And the fact that there is a Ghostbusters multiverse, and one of them is the cinematic universe that is Ghostbusters 2, Afterlife, and Frozen Empire. One of them is just the Answer the Call universe. One of them is Ghostbusters 1 into the Real Ghostbusters cartoon. through Extreme Ghostbusters and everything there. And then the last one is Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, Ghostbusters the video game, and then the IDW comics and everything that has happened in those, right? And then in those IDW comics, they have crossed over with the real Ghostbusters animated universe. They have crossed over with the Answer the Call universe. They never really go as far as the cinematic universe, but there's like reasons for that. And then there's also, I mean, like if we're talking real multiverse stuff of Ghostbusters, there is the fact that like there's the 88 miles per hour, where what if all the events of Ghostbusters had happened after 9/11, which is just fucking weird. But it is like if it happened in like 2004 instead of 1984, which is an interesting thing. And it's still like it'd be an offshoot universe, right? We know a thing or two about cinematic universes here at the Say Report. Anywho, so like before any of that, I was so mad at Afterlife because so many things in that film, discounting the fact that they puppeted the corpse of Harold Ramis, which does not feel like a way to honor somebody. A lot of the script undid things that happened in Ghostbusters the video game, which Harold Ramis had gone on record as saying, this is the third Ghostbusters film. This is what would have happened in it. This is the storyline we would have told. So then for like Jason Reitman to be like, this is the movie you want to see, and it to erase a bunch of stuff that one of the dead creators of the franchise said, I would like to consider this canon, right? That felt weird. What Ghostbusters Frozen Empire does is take a lot of that stuff that they eliminated from the canon by just ignoring the video game for Afterlife and making it happen in the cinematic universe. And so like I was really, that's when I got excited to see this movie. I think it was Argyle that I saw a trailer for Ghostbusters before, and the sewer dragon looks like a particular ghost that you bust in the Ghostbusters video game. Patience and Fortitude, the lions in front of the New York Public Library, they become possessed, and that is revealed in the video game that's a thing. They go to the old library, and it is the old library from the video game that you end up finding yourself in. So They did a lot of fan service for someone like me, right? And I don't think that I'm unique in the Ghostbusters fandom. I mean, I am unique in the fact that like I kind of fucking hate Ghostbusters now. I'll just say that. The fandom has become really toxic and just some other ways that I view it. But if you were somebody who played the video game and were listening to Aykroyd and Ramis saying, this is the third movie, this is probably as good as it's going to get, I don't think we're ever going to be able to make Ghostbusters Go to Hell, which was the proposed title for it. And like we've also talked about the books, right? We read the novelizations, the Shelley Fisk urban legend one that was also parts of the thing that ended up was going to be part of the third movie. Like things that were more research based, heavy-handed research based things. Like this felt like a Ghostbusters movie. This felt more like a Ghostbusters movie than Afterlife did. I liked that it was like a new villain that they were dealing with. I liked like the way it felt like Ghostbusters 2, the way it felt like the original Ghostbusters, the way that New York City felt important to this story.
Yeah. So, well, maybe this is where she should put a button on it then, because it sounds like in that regard it did succeed, and that's cool. And like I said, audience wise, it seems to be working for people. It really does. And more power to it. I don't know, and this will be the final thing I have to say about it. I don't know if it's going to be able to crawl out of the hole. That hole that every movie is now being thrown into, that has to make its way back out, a la fucking Bruce Wayne in after he gets his back broken. Like it's like every movie must go through this endurance test now, and we're not seeing a lot of movies make it out of that hole, right? Like and they're just not succeeding in the ways that they need to, or at least we expect them to, or would have expected them to 5 years ago, right? You know, so far this year, it seems like the big winner is Dune, which is not too surprising. But yeah, besides Dune making bank left and right, I don't really know if anything else in 2024 yet has really done that.
I mean, let's remember that The Beekeeper for like the first 8 weeks of this year was the -- movie.
The Beekeeper, yeah, and the Beekeeper, and the important thing to remember about that was a micro budget of a film that,
but still was the highest ranking movie over something like Mean Girls for a little bit. It wasn't until I don't even remember the movie that came out, and I feel bad about this every time that that ended up unseating it.
Wasn't it Bob Marley for like a
It was
week?
Bob Marley. It was
The
One Love. It was
Yeah,
One Love.
like
Yeah.
for like a week or two, it was tops. And then yeah, now
And then
Dune's been
Dune
just
happened.
dominating. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's like the situation. Yeah, it's One Love. I always forget about one. I really want to see the movie too. I just haven't gotten a chance to. But yeah, so that whole thing. So what I will say, right? I'm going to borrow an anecdote from Dale briefly because she's not podcasting right now, and I want to share it with the world. After we saw the movie, she looked at me and said, "So if anyone asks me if I like Ghostbuster Frozen Empire, my response is going to be, yeah, I loved it when I saw it for the first time in 2016." It borrows a lot of story elements from Answer the Call. And the reason that I bring up the Answer the Call of it all, you can go listen to our very special episode. We did one for the 5-year anniversary of that movie. Is Answer the Call, that first weekend, people were enchanted by it. There was talk of sequel. There was all of that. And I imagine that this Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I mean, can you go to Box Office Mojo real quick so we can see if they have like a projection on it? I don't really know how to use it.
Oh yeah.
Site.
Well, so it's in the 40 to 44 million. We're still in its first weekend, right? With the Sunday. But I know that off the top of my head from an article I was reading on it while I was kind of looking to see how it was doing yesterday. But yeah, it's projected to be in the 40 to 44 million. We'll know more next week.
Yeah, so we'll have more for you next week. But it's one of those things where like I wouldn't be surprised if it had a really good opening weekend, the same way that Answer the Call had a really good opening weekend, but then it doesn't have those legs. So even though I remember the Monday after Answer the Call, though where there's going to be a sequel, there's going to be a sequel, and then after the next weekend, it's like, yeah, so that sequel's not going to happen. We spoke too soon, and then months later still telling people, yeah, no, they canceled the Answer the Call sequel. I'm sorry. I'm disappointed too. It is like, I feel that same way. Someone compared Ghostbusters to Jurassic Park, where like you have a really good movie and then you keep trying to recapture that magic. I just don't understand. Like, there's clearly a market for Ghostbusters, right? You see them at every convention, people dressed up as Ghostbusters. It's still viable as a media thing, right? But I don't think it's going to have the legs. I don't think it's going to get out of that hole, and that is sad to me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, and you've brought up this point right at the end, and maybe what we should do is save Roadhouse and this conversation for next week, because man, we gotta do a nostalgia check on this show and in the world, like not just you and me, like the culture as a whole. This whole show, Say Report, like has really leaned on the idea that nostalgia sells since we started, and not because we want to like recreate something nostalgic to sell to you, but like this is what we're consuming, and we know the rest of the world is consuming a lot of this stuff, and a lot of it comes back to the fact that people really want these warm fuzzy feelings of these things they had when they were a kid, right? And we sit here in the week of the release of Quiet on the Set, right? The big behind the scenes reveal of all of the shit that was going on, and mostly Nickelodeon, but I from what I understand it touches on. I have not watched it.
I haven't either.
Like,
I can't bring myself to.
I don't think I'm going to. I mean, like, not out of like I'm not trying to disrespect any of the people that have been hurt in those situations, but more to the point, we've kind of known this for a while. I appreciate that somebody has brought all the information together and is presenting it to people that don't necessarily know. The amount of people who are having their eyes opened right now to some of the shit that happened to like Amanda Bynes and stuff like that, or why Drake Bell kind of has gone off the deep end in the last like 10 years and stuff like that. Like there's the amount of people that are just kind of realizing that is good. Like people should really be made aware of the terrible shit that was going on back then. But man, I don't know if I can bring myself to dive into that well, right? But that idea that we really want to go back to that time, and we saw this with like iCarly 2.0 and How I Met Your Father even kind of dove into this, right? But we want to recreate these things from our youth, but we're slowly starting to learn the price that a lot of people paid in order for our lives to be like this. We talk a lot about the 90s being this wonderfully affluent time where like things were just popping off left and right. Some of the craziest stuff in our culture as the US really kind of came to fruition at a time when we were just throwing money at everything, and we were just consuming left and right and loving it all, and how nothing compares to the TV shows we had in the 90s. Nothing compares to the cartoons, to the toys, to the we want to like love that era, and we want to go back to that era to the point where we're trying to recreate it now in the art that we make now for the last 15 years. Like we've really leaned into trying to recreate those feelings, and we're learning how damaging it was. I think people are starting to feel a little kind of put off at the idea of like like the purest example for me is the iCarly stuff and Jeanette McCurdy, right? That was the show that she was connected to when she was younger.
And it was
right.
Well, it was
and
Jeanette
like,
McCurdy on that. And then
why didn't she come back for the sequel? Why didn't she come back for the sequel? Well,
I feel like a lot of that comes from Sam and Cat as well. Like her story is not just iCarly, though. Holy fuck, some of the iCarly stuff. But the big one from Sam and Cat, right, is the fact that by all accounts, this is stuff that is talked about in the show, stuff that I have seen clips of. Dan Schneider had a bit of a foot fetish, and now Sam and Cat, when they're like, hey kids, send us pictures of your feet on Twitter. Like, the fuck is that? And the fact that,
well,
like,
I mean more to the way the audience kind of responded to that era, and now we're all kind of like cringing at our own like the response? Ways that we were like demanding answers. You know, the way that we felt as an audience, and I'm including myself in this because we're all responsible for this as part of this culture. But like the ways in which we felt entitled to get these things over the last couple of decades that were harkening back to our youth. And now we're realizing the price that those people paid back then. I think we're all kind of regretting being so shitty. We should regret being so shitty the last couple of decades about wanting that stuff back and wanting these people to answer our tweets and talk to us in our Reddit AMAs and all of this shit. Like we've been so greedy as audiences to try and get some of this stuff back, and now realizing how damaging it was back then to the people that were creating it, and we're growing up, we're kind of realizing there's a good reason why we progress past these eras, why we grow up and change, and why our entertainment shifts. And so now we're kind of in this weird space of like, do we want to keep riding this nostalgia train? Because the more we ride it, the more we learn how bad things were. Or do we start to look forward at bigger and better things? How do we do that when we have just shit on any new idea over the last 2 decades?
Yeah. An interesting thing I saw that's semi-related to this is the fact that, like, for the Nintendo Entertainment System, you had a Gilligan's Island game, a Three Stooges game, and some other, like, older property. And that the equivalent of that would be if a Cheers game were made for the PlayStation 4, right? But we never allowed that. We never allowed ourselves to be nostalgic about anything in the moment, really. Like, we always were kind of searching for the next thing, but also still demanding the same things that we had before. It's kind of insane. And you say that we were greedy. It's not just that we were greedy wanting these answers. And it's a royal we, right? It's not just Sejohn and I. It's like, as a society, we were greedily doing that. But we were also being conditioned to be that greedy. It wasn't just the thing that like we wanted answers. We were given those answers. The people who are creating, the CEOs, the C-suite individuals, they were encouraging us to be given those answers that we were asking for. They were encouraging
they basically starved us and turned us into a bunch of hungry dogs. And what happens when you starve a dog is it turns into a fucking dog fighter, right? Like that's what it became. Like they definitely created a monster, but we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge our own monstrosity.
You have to take advantage. You have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, oh, look at that, I'm a fucking monster. But it is like, if it were just that greed, there was this conditioning that also went into the water, and there's no bigger, like, fucking Street Sharks. Everybody is losing their fucking minds over the fact that Mattel's bringing back Street Sharks toys for the 30th anniversary. Do you know how many people have been able to have a Street Sharks, the show that people knew so little about, that one little fucking middle schooler created an entire fictional canon for the series that was considered
they just
real.
Lied. People Mandela affected themselves into believing that this whole other character existed on the show that never did. Right?
Yeah, it's one of the things that, like, I liked Street Sharks when I was younger, and am I excited to maybe get like an articulated Street Sharks figure? Yes, I am. But the rest of the world is just like, hey, remember this? And they remember it and they lose their minds over it. It's not just you starve the dog so they become a dog fighter, but then they also know how to give us just enough kibble so that we won't turn on them. Sorry, this got away from us. So the third movie that was the Late Night Devil movie. We're not going to talk about Roadhouse. Sejohn does bring up a good point. Let's hold it. Maybe Sejohn will have a chance to watch Roadhouse, and we can talk about it together.
I definitely want to talk about some of the weirdness with Roadhouse next week. We are not done with that conversation. I think honestly, it kind of does go hand in hand with some of the Late Night with the Devil stuff. But we'll get into it when we get a little bit more information.
Yeah, we'll get some more information.
I will say part of it is that we're only just kind of seeing the tip of that iceberg.
Yeah. I mean, I watched it right before this to talk about it, and oh my god. Here's what I will say, right? Little teaser, if you're on the fence about seeing the Roadhouse remake, that is a Prime original film, which is something that we'll talk about. I loved the Point Break remake from 2015, and what made that movie work was how unlike the original Point Break it was. That's also what makes Roadhouse 2024 work. It is almost a Roadhouse 3.
Nice.
By all accounts. So that is something to note.
Ooh.
Yeah. All right. So in addition to the Roadhouse, sorry, it's held up, but Late Night Devil can be the third movie in the Fountain Soda. We are also in a conversation about nostalgia, kicking off another little nostalgic thing that's going to be going for the next at least 4 years, if not longer. So just if you want to be prepared for next episode where we do that, it's the 30th anniversary of Kevin Smith's Clerks. And since that takes place over Easter weekend, we had talked about for any episodes that we're recording on Easter, since we record on Sunday, we're going to talk about those movies for their 30th anniversaries. So if you want to be fully prepared for next week's episode, it's a report. Definitely check out Doug Liman's Roadhouse on Amazon Prime Video, streaming original, blah, 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 whatever it's fucking called now. But also, dust off your copy of Clerks. I'm probably going to grab the VHS that I have over my head with all the other VHS. No, I'm not. I'll probably watch a more recent version. But we are, as turncoaty, hypocritical as it might be, we're going to also be taking a critical look at Clerks next week's episode. So some new Roadhouse, some Clerks, just to get everything ready for everybody so that it's not a surprise next week when it's less about everything, more about this one specific thing.
More about Clerks and watching movies from 30 years ago and whether or not we can remake that, kind of recapture that, which will be an interesting conversation.
So anything else that you want to say to the people, Sejohn, before we send them on their merry way?
Catch us on our Discord. That would be the biggest thing.
Yeah, definitely catch us on our Discord. I have the intermittent thing. I'm going to put it out there so you can get it. But again, the easiest way to get in touch with us, if you want to join the Discord, still send that email to thesayreport@gmail.com. Any other private comments you don't want to put into a Discord, also great. Just make sure in the subject line, if it's specifically for myself, Devon, or for my host companion, Sejohn, you put our names in the subject line so that it gets filtered out appropriately. If you don't want me to know the secrets that you have for Sejohn, I understand that. Sejohn's a much better listener than I am. You've listened to 375 episodes of the show. You've probably gotten that by now. But I mean, anything else?
Man.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. And William, please take us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.